Very good evening to everyone. So we are gathered together today in this special Dhamma talk, which is actually a usual program, but today we have a special reason for having the Dhamma talk, which is on Noeline's request to pass merits to her beloved husband. So we have together with us the whole, almost all, I presume, Leela Sena family who has come together to listen to a Dhamma talk today and to share merits with their beloved father, husband, who has passed away some 5 years ago. So before the start of the session, let us now chant Namo Tassa together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. All right. In the teachings delivered, presented by the Buddha took account to preach upon a path which was clear in the beginning, the middle, and the end. Like the Bodhisattva, the Buddha before his attainment, many Bodhisattvas before him, before they received what we know as Niyata Vivarana, they took up a practice which we today know as the practice of the paramis or the perfections or the Buddhist perfections. The Buddhist perfections are a tenfold practice where the practitioner commits to its upholding at every instance and stage, especially when it comes to some sort of challenge in your daily life. For example, it would be so that if the person, if the practitioner, if the Bodhisattva is not very willing to sort of give or to share or to not, if he feels that he is unable or it is a challenge for him to do, the paramis would instigate action that would then challenge him to do it. That would then challenge him to do it. The paramis, the 10 perfections, form a structure of practice that any bodhisattva. What is the meaning of a bodhisattva? Bodhi means enlightenment. Sattva means the person who seeks. So any person who seeks enlightenment could use the term bodhisattva. If any one of you is looking for a different title to your practice, you could start calling yourselves bodhisattvas as well. So a bodhisattva would then take on the practice depending upon what level of enlightenment the practitioner would want to attain, would take on this practice. So what are the 10 perfections? The 10 perfections are, I've just made a little chart so that you could just look through it. Starting with generosity, morality, renunciation, insight or wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolution, aditthana, or maybe we could even say determination, loving kindness, and equanimity, upekkha. These are the 10 perfections. These are the practices which any bodhisattva undertakes to uphold throughout the time of his practice up until he would then attain enlightenment as a Buddha, as a Pacheka Buddha, or as an Arahant. The relevance of these 10 perfections are: the 10 perfections offer a wholesome practice which keeps the individual engaged with purpose and meaning. With purpose and meaning. Now, the important part of that sentence is actually purpose and meaning. We prefer to have some sort of meaning in our lives, to be involved with something which is of the greater good, or with something which helps us get up in the morning, something which inspires us, something that we are passionate about. This is what we would maybe tell our children: do something that you love to do something that inspires you. This is something that we would tell anyone that we would love. The perfections offer a standard of livelihood in a way that these perfections are lived in practice in a person's or throughout a person's daily life, in order that these perfections would then aid in that person drawing closer towards enlightenment or the position of enlightenment. What are the core values behind the perfections? Perfections are not just simply that which is good. It is that which is enlightening. The perfections are goal-oriented, meaning the person who has the resolve to carry forward, carry out the perfections will ultimately attain enlightenment. It will happen. Depending on what level of enlightenment one requires or what one would want to achieve, the perfection or the practice level would reflect that, and that practice would essentially lead the person to enlightenment. It gives the person, it gives the practitioner a sense of path, direction. The perfections, as you just saw, I'm going to put up the chart again. If you just brush through these 10 parts, these 10 parts are specifically dedicated to perform one function. What is that function, and how does that apply to us? That function is the dissolution or the disconnection from ego self. The perfections are designed in a manner that the practice of the perfections will draw you away from egocentric behavior and thought to a position of selfless behavior and thought. Selfless behavior and thought. But how would being selfless help me? We will come to that. When we carry on with our practice, or we carry on with even daily life, when we are not challenged, when our minds are not challenged, when the things that we do to live are not challenged, we could easily feel a sense of monotony in our lives, a sense of boredom. The perfections, being what they are, offers challenge, brings challenge into our life in a way that we are constantly dedicated to improve ourselves and to also do things in the wholesome, in the good, that we thought we might not be able of doing, that we never thought that we would possibly be able to do. It pushes us, it challenges our potential, or what we think our potential might be, bringing a sense of liveliness into our lives, into our practice. And all of the perfections Although the word perfection, the word is the English translation, but the word is such a bad word, which doesn't really sit well. Perfection. There's nothing called perfect. There's nothing, we are not assuming the idea that we are going to arrive at a position of perfection. But these are ways by which the mind cleanses its impurities. Cleanses the impurities through letting go, through pushing yourself through the hurdles and barriers that our ego selves might have set within ourselves, not anyone else, but within ourselves. And we push ourselves to now jump over those hurdles and boundaries that have been set. All of these mentalities, which goes into performing these bodily, verbal, and mental perfections, are all based on compassion. And when compassion is present, there is room for flaw. There is room for failure. But where there is no room for is failure and that sort of thought where you stick to the failure. That is that endearing nature of wholesome. When a person truly embraces the essence behind the practice of the perfections, we know that the practices are fueled by three specific minds or roots of mind. These three specific roots of mind are known as alobha, adosa, amoha, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. The words do not do justice. So alobha, adosa, amoha. When a person implies or works with alobha, adosa, amoha, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion again and again and again, these three roots of wholesome fuels confidence, fuels resilience, fuels energy, strength, perseverance. Everything that is required by a person to pick him or herself up, to pick themselves up and do it again. Maybe better this time, to learn from mistakes. Whereas its unwholesome counterpart, greed, hatred, delusion, makes the human persona far more fragile with every instigation. Hatred weakens the being, deludes the being, delusion deludes the being, makes a being disconnected from what is of true reality. Greed, again, deludes the being and weakens the being. But its wholesome counterpart doesn't do any of that. It doesn't do any of that. When lobha, specifically, is in operation, we cling on to positions of our life which we like. If we like a specific restaurant, if we like to go to a specific venue or location for vacation, wherever, all of these positions we cling on to. We build a mental image and experience fueled by the sensations, fueled by the perceptions, fueled by our human experience, which we've gone through whilst we were eating that dish or in that location, what we felt, how everyone was so happy. We cling on to this image. We cling on to this image. Now, let us say in about a year, we revisit that same place with our family, maybe with the same people, right? We revisit the same hotel, the same location, we go to the same places because we've had so much of fun the time earlier. And now we find ourselves in a position where we compare, am I having enough fun or as much fun as I had last time? Did this dish taste the same or is it better or worse? we find ourselves in a position where we constantly then compare. We try to make it better, or at least equate to the memory of the previous experience we've had with the location. This element is what essentially we are going to be speaking about today, which is necessity and luxuries. What if the fear that rules and governs our behavior, what if I lose it all? What if I lose it all? There was this ancient Roman philosopher, Seneca. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a Stoic philosopher. But other than being a philosopher, he was also a person whose occupation, or rather whose business, we would today relate to by the term of a venture capitalist, right? That was, he owned many luxurious villas. He was a very wealthy sort of person of the time in ancient Rome. Now, Seneca used to do this actually not once in a while, very regularly. He used to do this. Whilst he enjoyed all the luxuries that his wealth would allow, he would make it a point to regularly sleep in the outhouse, right? In the outhouse, in a place where the maid and the help would often occupy, right? Or maybe even worse, conditions that were far more even worse and simple and humble. And when he was spending his night at the outhouse, he would drink, he would not have any help. He would put himself into that experience, right? He would eat stale loaves of bread, slices of bread. He would drink cold water and all of these things. He would really put himself down to that experience of living in the outhouse. And this is something that he did very regularly. Why did he do this? He was very successful. He had the means. He was very wealthy. He had all the things that he would want to live a luxurious life, but he would make it a point to go and live in the outhouse very regularly and eat stale bread and all of these things. Why? Because he wanted to remind himself what his life would be if he had lost it all, or if he loses it all, and come to the realization that it actually won't be that bad. That he actually could survive and he actually could live, and he would be able to do that if he does one day or happens to lose it all. This is recorded to say this is how Seneca developed the confidence that he needed to make the decisions that he made on a business front, on a strategic front, because for him, he was not worried. He did not have the fear of losing it all. Not because he thought that he was invincible, but because he thought, even if I did lose it all, I'd be quite all right and happy. This instigation is very important. We hear or we read, there are so many books out there under the topic, under the theme of from rags to riches. But we rarely hear anyone writing about riches to rags. Maybe that is what we require. From riches to rags and yet happy. This essence of the mind, where we assume that we need all the things that we have in our life and maybe even more to remain happy, is something which is by nature flawed, because there might be people here too who have it all, who can go on choice vacations. So the only sort of the difficulty might be pressing a button to book the ticket and the hotels, which also can be quite a drag. But yet, there might be people here who have the luxury to do that anytime that they choose. However, what am I feeling inside here is a good question to ask. Do I feel the sense of fulfillment that I would like to feel? Am I feeling that sense of accomplishment? Or are we looking for something far more deeper? Are we still looking for something, an accomplishment, a fulfilling factor? That is what the Buddha always sort of promoted. Think, are you getting what you want from the life that we have chosen to live? From the norms that we are embedded within? From the norms that society has set for us? If you are, good. If you are not, then what is wrong? What could we possibly do which is different? When NASA asked their astronauts, what was the thing which causes stress to you, right? The study showed that most astronauts who spend time in space, the biggest stress that they have is wondering how their loved ones are doing without them. And then they asked, how do you tackle this stress? Or how do you rather tackle stress? And most of the astronauts had replied, saying that they like taking photographs of Earth. Because Earth is something with meaning to them. Earth has more meaning to them because of their families, the lives that they've lived. Prompting an idea that when we do something which is meaningful to ourselves, which enriches ourselves, which has some sort of path for ourselves, we feel far more happier than we do. The Buddhist practice always brings the mind into a position where we contemplate whether all that I have is the fullest of what I could potentially have. Whether the happiness that I have is something which does actually make me happy, or is it something which makes me want to long for another sort or different form of happiness? That is where Vipassana comes in. That is where the Buddha's teachings of Vipassana changed the whole of ancient India and spread across the Silk Road to all the different other countries of the ancient world. The thoughts, the doctrine of Vipassana changed the pattern of thought in the ancient world for good. This was by the teachings on 1, impermanence, 2, suffering, and 3, non-self. Again, the words do not do the greatest of justice, but this is what we have to work with. Anicca, dukkha, anatma. Whilst we might be comparing or putting ourselves into a position to sort of think that we might be able to gain more or to see the more positive side of an attitude or an experience, in Buddhism, we are led to believe or to look at the reality of what is. And when we look at the reality of what is, we come to realize that our necessities are far more simpler than what we assume it to be. That most of the things that in our life are not necessities, but simply luxuries, through delusion now thought of as necessities. And this is something that we work with. This is something that we try to cultivate an understanding over in order that we might be able to tap into the most truest part of our being and self. So, can we actually connect to something which is truer? To try to give that a bit more meaning, let us sit for 10 minutes of meditation, if that's all right with everyone. So, if we sit comfortably, taking a deep breath in, filling up our chests, Holding on to the breath for a moment. Breathing out, relaxing deeper, deeper, deeper. Taking another deep breath in, filling up the chest, holding on to the breath until you can't hold on to it any longer. Letting go of the air. Feel the relaxation all across the body as you let go of the air. Let us put aside for this short moment everything to do with the past and everything to do with the future. Simply coming into the present, embracing the present. Taking another deep breath in. Breathing out, relaxing deeper and deeper. See if you are able to come into a state of tranquility within yourself. Put aside everything else and devote this very moment to observing the simple breath, the breath arising and passing away. Deeper and deeper. Observe if you are able to go with every passing moment into a state of stillness. Using the breath as an anchor. Into the present moment. Becoming fully and completely aware of all that is arising and passing away all across the body. Without any attachment. Without any need to change anything. Embracing reality within this moment. Observe. 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 Every moment that the mind wanders or becomes agitated, Simply take a deep breath in and relax. Do not worry about the outside world. The world will be there when you wake from your meditation. So be in the present and observe. 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 How everything arises and passes away. Constantly in a cycle, arising, possessing, passing away. Still the mind by embracing the present. Still the mind by opening yourself to any and all experience based upon this present. Observe the peaceful nature found within this present moment, free from burden, turmoil, worry. A state associated with being rather than doing. Gently allow yourself to fully understand, to grasp the experience of the present. Allow the mind and body to embrace the pathway to the present, the ins and outs, the feeling associated, the freedom. Gently, gently. Taking a deep breath in, letting go, relax, relax, relax. Mind and body. Another deep breath in. Relax, relax, relax. Taking another deep breath in. Letting go. Opening your eye and becoming aware of the present. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. So this feeling, from those of you who have your cameras on, you're quite chilled out. So this feeling that we have, once we sort of go into this state associated with the present, for some, although it might seem like a very simple thing, meditation, I've seen my mother doing it, I've seen my father doing it, I've seen my grandfather doing it. It doesn't seem that important because they're all doing it. But it is not as simple as it seems, isn't it? When we close our eyes, when we try to go inward to find a state of peace and tranquility, to quiet ourselves, to distance ourselves from the hassle and the bustle of everything that is going on in our lives, then we see the true challenge of meditation, of how to go into a state of awareness. You could at this very moment go on Google and pull out different articles on the topic of resilience. And I promise you that in almost 80% of all the articles that you would go through and read, you will find the word awareness as a suggestion to cultivate and develop resilience. Awareness. Awareness forms a pivotal key which comes into building and cultivating strength of the being. It is no easy feat, but doesn't mean that it is necessarily very difficult as well. This practice, when it comes to the perfections, the 10, starting with generosity and ending in equanimity, if we take one by one each part of these 10 perfections, and if we are to analyze them with their practical implications upon our own life, we would find the lack the lacking of a certain perfection or an ideal of practice to be the root of some sort of problem in our lives. Whether the person has an inclination to want to attain enlightenment or not. Enlightenment is a state of mind which experiences the fruits of everything good and wholesome within the human experience. Compassion is a very important aspect of the human experience. It is the compassion that parents have towards their children, which gives children the strength, the confidence, the self-worth. We could rename that compassion love, name it whatever you might like to name it. But that love, that compassion gives the child the strength, the self-confidence to lead their own way. The ability to cultivate a sense of generosity in one's life, the ability to give something without expecting anything in return, is one of the most important aspects of family life, of friendships. The ability to give time, effort, and when help is needed, financially or otherwise, to be able to give that. These 10 parts, whether it is practice as an aspect of Buddhism or whether it is practice as an aspect of humanism, in both ways, which really isn't much different from one another, is in both ways would lead to a state of happiness. That state would also pronounce or bring together a person who is strong, who is supported, and who is very much connected to reality. And what is reality? Reality, in terms of resilience, I went through a couple of sort of definitions, the Webster dictionary, and these dictionaries sort of pronounce suffering in our lives as something to wake from, to sort of avoid, to sort of heal from. But the difference in Buddhism is, in comparison to those sort of reflections given with regards to resilience, in Buddhism, we are taught to not run away from suffering, but to embrace it. And if we put ourselves, our own personal experience, coming into terms with the suffering in our lives, with the pain in our life, is what makes us stronger, rather than suppressing the pain in our life, which often leads to worse off states. Suppression is not what we are counting at. We are counting at a being who is able to realize that the world is as much good as that the world is as much pleasure as it is not so much pleasure. The world has good as much as it has the bad aspects. Awakening to that sort of reality is what we form, or what we come down to through our awareness. Not to delude ourselves by hoping that we could aspire for a state that is only associated with the good and pleasant, and to disassociate ourselves from that which is unpleasant and unwholesome. For a person to truly come into terms with that, that is where the awareness comes in. That is where the awareness comes in. We have one of the flaws that might exist within you and I as human beings living this human experience is that we often find ourselves proliferating upon the suffering that we might have and the experience of suffering that we might have, often to a certain extent where we might assume that we might not be able to recover. But if the decades have taught us anything, is that we are very, very resilient beings. If the science of our organic matter has taught us anything, human beings are the most resilient beings on this planet. We adapt, and we adapt again. This is a position. Through Vipassana, we come to realize that we can adapt, that the memories, the situations, the sensations that we might have clung to earlier, we are able to experience those things without the comparison element, without hoping that that same experience will return. And that is where the Buddha talks about the 8 worldly conditions: praise and blame, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, gain and loss. These are, if you live, if any organism lives in this world, in this universe, this is part of the contract that you sign. You will experience these 8-fold worldly conditions. Even beings as great as Jesus or Buddha or whoever it might be out there will go through the same. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. These are not necessarily bad things. But for the being who lives with what we call ayoniso manasikara, wrong attention, the person who lives with wrong attention might take in these experiences of life in a way that it shatters their personality, their confidence, their strength. But the person who understands the law of nature, the law of the world, the reality of these conditions, the reality of the human experience, when you understand it, how could that delusion now arise to shatter your being? That is where awareness, vipassana, comes in. That is how the connection between these paramis, the challenge. We often, I have this sort of retiree meditation class that I do in Colchester, right? So I recently asked them, because they come from very different backgrounds, and most of them are people who've done a lot of important jobs and all of these things. And now they've retired to the countryside and they live quiet lives. And I, whilst we were having tea, I asked him, look, how did you adjust, from living your whirlwind of a life to now settling down in the countryside? And most of them said very badly. Most of them said very badly. We are still looking for things to do. Still looking for things to do. Quiet in the mind might seem very simple. It might seem as if, something that we can put aside because it's not that important. But it is because of that lacking nature that even with the beautiful things that we have, the beautiful things that we can afford to have, the beautiful relationships that we have, that we often find a sense of lack in fulfillment. with all the luxuries, the comforts, the relationships, the beautiful people, the support systems that you have built, still, even today, feels not enough. And that is because of that mind, not because of anything else. That is why this practice is important. That is why this commitment and dedication would take you a long way. Forget about Nibbana, even to enjoy this life that we have. So I hope that this, in a way, inspires you to sort of go into, do a bit of research, cultivating a daily practice that would enable you. And when I say practice, it is really about this contemplative awareness, this prajna. If I might just go back before sort of closing things up. See, all of these 10 parts that you would see from dana. Now I know the Sri Lankans, when you hear the word dana, you might, the mind often goes to taking dana to the temple, right? But that is not the only thing to do with dana, right? Dana is has a very broad spectrum of things that you could do to fulfill it. Just take a look. Generosity, morality, renunciation, insight, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolution, loving kindness, equanimity. These are states of mind which can be operational within one specific consciousness that arises within the moment. So right now, let us say that you have nothing except, let us say, except dana. You only have dana, let us say. The ability, you love to give, you love to feed people, you love to feed the poor, right? You just love it. You just love seeing people eat. Right? You just love seeing people eat. And us Asians, we love seeing people eat for some reason. I don't know why. Right? We give. But because you will only have dana, you will find that this too will become something that you get over. Why? Because it is not supported by prajna, by energy, by patience. For example, now especially, sometimes when we do give danas, we often get disappointed a bit, right? Maybe it is the way the dana happened. Maybe it is the circumstances that it happened with, something leading up to it. The mind, yes, we were happy before we gave it, but as we were giving it, the mind wasn't very wholesome. It was not a very pleasant experience. Now you see, the inability to deal with that circumstance and continue the purity of generosity was because of the lacking of khanti, virya, and prajna. The perfections are developed in a manner where morality will link with dana. To that group, nekkhamma will link, or renunciation. Prajna, sometimes we give and we regret giving it afterwards, right? We might not speak about it, but we might, I have less now, or something might appear in our minds. That is because of the lack of renunciation, nekkhamma. All of these parts in the perfections are parts which makes your resolve stronger. If you do it, you know why you did it, you're confident in your performance of conducting it, and after doing it, you are resolute that you have done something good. Why? It's supported by everything: renunciation, the ability to give, insight, the ability to understand why you're giving it, the energy which goes into giving, the patience with the people that you're giving to, the loving kindness associated towards the people that you're giving and trying to help. All of these parts, truthfulness, being truthful to oneself. In all these parts, what we find is a cross-section of a being who can carry out any action, and then be resolute that the person has done something good, be happy about the action that has been performed, and lives on drawing happiness from that event. Drawing happiness from that event. The perfection builds a person's happiness. It builds a person's strength. It builds a person's confidence. And moreover, it gives the person a sense of fulfillment. Because why? It is all rooted in that which is good. Alobha, non-greed. Adosa, non-hatred. And amoha, non-delusion. You're completely aware of what it is that you're doing. Completely. That is why these perfections are important. That is why perfections are linked to resilience. That is why we sort of pronounce perfections are pronounced in Theravada, in Mahayana, in Tibetan, in all forms of Buddhism. Perfections have a predominant place. Why? Because it builds the person who is now able to attain. Oftentimes, even with regards, let's say, mothers, fathers too, not to exclude anyone, do not do not come for me. Mothers and fathers do so much for their children, but sometimes when we do not feel that we are getting something back, or we do not feel as if they are having the gratitude that they should be having, then we feel a little bit, oh, I did so much. I tried my best. Yes, I might not have been perfect, but I tried my best. That was all I was able to give. That thought, you see, mother's love, I'm saying mother's love, mother's love is one of the most celebrated forms of love in Buddhism. And the person who gives that at times develops thoughts of not negativity, but a sense of, oh, I did so much, and is this how I'm treated? You get what I mean? Why is that? Because again, that sense of bringing together in the perfections, the prajna aspects, the nekama aspects, those aspects of mind are not fulfilled. Every single day, whoever cooks at home, every single meal has the possibility of being a dana to those people that you love. Every single meal that you prepare can be a preparation that you do connected to that which is enlightenment. However, we don't do it like that, do we? We just cook, right? We just cook. But if we were to, there's nothing to regret. Because that essential element of physical energy that you put in is something that draws you closer to the selfless. Anything that draws us closer to the self, often we find connects to suffering later on. Think about it. Anything that draws us closer to self causes some sort of suffering later on. Anything that draws us closer to the non-self does not give the propensity for suffering. Even if it is physicality or mental. I hope that through this talk that I've sort of given, it inspires you in all positive and good ways to sort of do your research, to sort of question, right? And cultivate a practice that is essential and aligns with the happiness that we want to experience in the world, in a way that we truly sort of come into an authentic realization about our truest positions within ourselves with regard to the experience of happiness and how we deal with pain and suffering in our lives. For me, for a person who has come from another religion, I always say this, I find it an absolute blessing that I have come across Buddhism and I was able to become a monk and also dedicate my time into this practice, because I am as clear and sure as day, whatever else that I might have done would not have made me happy, or as happy as I am doing what I do right now. So I hope this inspires you in whatever ways, and for you to sort of cultivate your own practice and to find your own happiness and to work towards that authentic happiness that we would all love to live with and to sort of also die with. So with all the merits that we have accrued, with all the time that the Dhamma Center group or the closer group has spent in practice, we share all the merits that we have accrued with late Mr. W.A. Leela Sena, Noeline's beloved husband, and also the father to Lakit, Lasita, Kirula, Subodha, and their families as well. So we share all the merits with late Mr. W.A. Leela Sena, and also share merits with the whole family, all the departed relatives, and all the departed relatives of all those of you who are gathered here today over Zoom to listen to this Dhamma talk. May you all be well and happy. May these merits that we share with the late Mr. Leela Sena, wherever he might be, may these merits support him to enter from light to light, to go from light to light, to go from darkness to light, to work in his own way towards his deliverance through the attainment of Nibbana. By all the merits that we accrue, may we all share in these merits. May we all take it as inspiration and strength to cultivate our own paths of practice so that we might, on a daily basis, from moment to moment, draw closer, nearer towards Nibbana and hopefully attain Nibbana in this very life. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Take care, everyone. Have a pleasant rest of the evening and good night. Theron Sunday.